Let's talk about the 2024 referendum. Why not? Yeah. But first, and the team's probably like, oh my gosh, he doesn't have his notes and he has a microphone. This is dangerous because we've got things to talk about, but I'm compelled to share this with you because I think it fits. Because you've heard me talk about people, purpose, pride, and it's the way that my mind just thinks about education, thinks about my work, thinks about my life, sadly, sometimes, because it never turns off about this place. Today's the best day ever to be an MMSD. It is. I feel like that every day. It's been 3 months, I know, right? But it's really been a whole life too, as many of you know. So, did any of you watch a certain program last night called the DNC? And this is not political, but I do have to point this out. The star of last night was a 17-year-old boy who now has memes all over the world about his reaction to his father and the candidate for vice president sharing his story. I don't know if you saw that. The camera sure caught it. Well, I know that boy because I was the superintendent in his school district. And when his family moved to St. Paul, the big city of St. Paul, they had to decide, my gosh, as the governor, where is our kid going to go to school? Because that's the first thing people ask. First thing people ask me too. I'm so glad my children are out of school. Not that I'm comparing myself to the governor. I'm not. And there were some real concerns about a lot of things. And there's a lot of choices in the state of Minnesota as well. So they chose St. Paul Central High School. And any of you who know that district know that that is the flagship school of the district. It has a history that is incredible. It was the first public high school in the state. And people love that high school. Their mayor, not our mayor anymore, their mayor, Melvin Carter, is a graduate of St. Paul Central High School. And it hasn't been just an easy journey. Gus has had some real challenges that he's had to confront. But yet I look at that last night and I see a child with his family on national TV as his authentic self. And everyone in his family and around him is unashamed of that. Many are unaware of the challenges. And to me, I looked at that and said, that's public education right there. This boy who, you know, like many maybe doubted his abilities or how he might look to the world if he behaves as who he is and would be judged. That's public education right there. It's the first thing that came into my mind is that's Central High School because I know that he's been embraced by a very supportive public education community. Now, the great story like that is also filled with many that are not that way for our students. And that's why we're here. That's why we do our work. I'm looking at so many of you who have every single role in the district. There's not a thing in our district that isn't supported or touched by you in this room today. Everything, and I mean everything. Some of it you may not even know. So to get back on script a little bit, let's talk about the 2024 referendum. You know, it's important that you have information. Information is important, and it's going to be difficult to get information out, I think, in the next 70 plus days, because there's a couple other things going on too. Not to mention the start of a great school year. The start of a great school year where I feel for the first time in a long time, we're talking about the start of the school year moving forward and not the start of the school year and all the stuff we've been through in the past. Okay, I'm not denying that, I'm not suppressing that, I'm just saying the volume is turned down on the last 4 years a little bit. Okay, it's still challenging, don't get me wrong, but it is time to start and move forward, it absolutely is. Your thoughts and feedback are really important because this work isn't about one person or one presentation by somebody who is well-versed in the budget reality for MMSD in the state of Wisconsin for that matter. We've got a great expert that's part of our team, but it's about all of us. Because you know that the informal channels, the back channeling, the hey, did you hear, the did you see this, how is this going to help me, my taxes are going up, you know that those are real conversations that are happening all the time, many of them of which we don't have a way to capture. But I do believe by equipping you with information, not asking you to go out and kibosh everything you hear that might be wrong, but I am asking you to share information that you know is accurate, if you choose. Okay, cannot make any of you share information, but want you to be prepared to share information. So a brief presentation you'll have today, and then you'll have a chance to see the questions that were approved by the Board of Education. That's why we're here today. I'd like to share just a little bit about, if you could advance to the next one, I think I talked a little bit about why we're here, who we are. And I hope you know this, and I hope you look at this as this is who we are, and we're really proud of it. 18% of our students, Black or African American. By the way, you know, if you look at those percentages, 39% white, in 1970, you would have seen that number up there would have been 87%. So in the last 50 years, we've gone from 13% to 60%, right? And with the city growing the way that it is, or predicted to grow, I can predict, I think, you know, because my lifetime I've seen the change in Madison, the next 50 years, I think, is also going to bring change. Our country has changed, our state has changed, Madison has changed. And I think we have to be ready to not say that that's going to be a challenge. We have to embrace it as an opportunity. We really do. And the questions that we're putting to the community on November 5th will have a long way, will go a long way in terms of our ability to embrace our students, our families, each other in the way that we want Madison to be in the future. So again, really important for us to know who we are. As you can see, we've got a lot that we can boast about. And you know, there are times like this where people are questioning, sometimes some people are questioning the district. We have to be able to pull out some pride points as well. We absolutely do. And this isn't new. We didn't have to search far for this. Many of you know that, yes, this is us. This is the work that we do. Or we've always had this level of achievement accolades in our district. And we have, for many of them. But we've got a long ways to go in terms of ensuring that more students can access this opportunity and be successful and be part of this story as well. 21 schools offering dual language, which is critically important. As someone who fully supports and believes in the role of dual language, it serves many purposes. First and foremost, it sees and values a culture that's different from the one that's ingrained here in Madison. The one that's ingrained in the first school in Madison in 1846, somewhere down on the Isthmus. I'm pretty sure that was maybe one language, if not English, maybe German. But I don't think it was called dual language. I think it was called, that's a language people speak. Right? So that's what this community is built on, but now we are a global community. We are a global city and becoming more and more global each and every day. And that's something that we should develop a real pride for and be able to make sure that our students and families and staff feel that way too. 5th grade students have an opportunity to play a string instrument. Some of you know that used to be what grade? No, what grade? Wasn't it 3rd grade? Wasn't it 3rd before? Didn't 3rd get cut? Was it 4th? Got the historian over here. Anyway, yes, and that was a big decision. So the community remembers, those who have been around for referenda know that these are the kinds of decisions the district has had to make over time. So this note right here, you know, people wanting to preserve or even grow that, they know it's really important for our overall district financial health. Our Merit Scholars, again, a long time history of celebrating that right in here in the McDaniels Auditorium. Last year was a banner year for advanced placement tests, thanks to all of you, knowing that we almost grew out of the Alliance Center, is what I heard from the space over there that's available. That's just a great testament to how we're preparing our students for their futures. And 27 schools offering full or half-day 4K. Now this to me is a great celebration, thanks to all of you, because when I left in 2013, many of you know, that number was way down. MMSD, and this isn't about people, this is factual, was way behind in terms of implementing 4K for a lot of reasons, of which we don't have to even go back and try to understand. Know that it is my belief, and it is going to be my continued support, that that number increases until every single child in this community has the ability to enroll in a high-quality early learning opportunity, 4K, and if MMSD has the capacity to do it, I want it right here. But I will also partner with our community to make sure that we are working collaboratively to ensure that our students get off to the very best start possible. Next slide, please. And so, again, just want to end with our priorities as we look to why should we support MMSD, the community might ask. And these are some of the buckets that we can talk about. You just heard me talk about the importance of early learning, high quality early learning. And here's the thing, because there will be people in the community as well who say, well, if the school district does early learning, what does that mean for my center that does it, or the family, friends, and neighbor network that does it? And that's something we do need to talk about. But I also believe that MMSD can be the leader and can be the universe for early learning, and that we don't have to be the main show for every single child. We can partner with our communities in ways too. Head Start, our family, friends, and neighbors. We can be a resource. We can share ideas. We can share students and families, and we can build bridges to make sure that every single child in this community has a great experience as early as possible. Well-rounded opportunities, more important now than ever. Who would have thought that in 1800s that there'd be 2 high schools in Madison? I was just telling our team about this a little bit. 2 high schools. Can anyone name the 2 high schools, 2 first high schools in Madison? One of them was? What was the second one? Wisconsin University High, Wisconsin High. It was a school built on the university. It wasn't built for all children in Madison. It really wasn't. It was very much a private school before they called it private schools. Now, you look at the pedagogy in those 2 schools, Central thought of where all the kids go. Maybe vocational before they probably did call it vocational in the 1800s. Industrial, preparing the workforce. Whereas Wisconsin High, Socratic seminars, right? Social emotional learning before you called it that. It was a place to truly develop the whole child, the whole citizen, and prepare students for ways and futures that were really, truly preparing them for life in a way that only some students had that opportunity. So that's what the history of this district is built on. It really is. Tale of 2 cities, something we hear often and something we hear in 2024, just like it was created back in the 1800s. So we want all students to have a well-rounded opportunity. And who should determine that? Should the superintendent say, this is what you get? No. Our families and our students should, along with our staff. Our staff, too, have ideas. I've heard a few. Okay, and it's important. It's really important that we get to know who we are and program in a way that provides well-rounded opportunities. Multilingual education, again, you can't travel to any public school district around the country, and if this is not part of their vision, part of their strategic plans, part of their strategic thinking, they're absolutely asleep. So these are ways that we have to continue to grow as a public school district. Culture and climate, again, everything I just said, forget about it if we're not also focusing or making our number one culture and climate. That could mean safety. That could mean making sure that we're fully staffed, something we talk about a lot, something that continues to be a challenge. But to me, it's more important, what's more important to me is connection. We want our students to be connected to their school, to their staff. We want our staff to be connected to families. We want our staff to be connected to each other. These connections are important. Right? If you think about the network of a school and a school community, and you start perhaps taking away some of those connections, you very much are eroding the opportunity, the capacity, the potential for what a positive school and district culture and climate can be. So these are areas we need to strengthen. We need to strengthen them each and every day, something we work at. And I think I'm done. Is it now, Bob? All right, Bob, sorry, I went a little bit over. Bob Solner, everyone. And let me just say that I'm thrilled that Bob is here to help present. This is challenging. In a time where resources are questionable, in a time where the law does not provide us the revenue that we need to operate a world-class public school district, and in a time where we have to tell the community, here is what we are asking you to approve, in addition to having to have a budget approved, Bob is preparing 2 different budgets with many scenarios while not knowing exactly what our future is. And he's just done a great job with his team and so many of you in this room and working to get it down. So Bob Soldner, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe. It always sucks to follow Joe. I've learned that early on. Joe's been here for a short time, but I do not like to follow Joe because that's a tough act to follow. Thank you, Joe. For those of you who are standing, come on up, grab a place to sit, or are you comfortable standing in the back of the room? I just want to take a pause, invite you up. So I do a lot of public speaking, and I got to tell you, I'm nervous right now because I'm talking to you. I'm talking to the folks I work with, and Joe's absolutely right. This is collaboration. This is teamwork. It's not just one person. We've been working, and the district has been working along with the school board. The priorities that Joe mentioned in terms of early literacy, multilingual, our DLI programs, culture and climate. This is an ongoing goal of the school board and the Madison community. And so our conversation in terms of putting the context, our budget goals for 24-25 is what's on the slide right now. Joe mentioned some things are the same. Madison continues to invest in their communities. Madison School Board continues to look to close opportunity gaps, but it is a continuation of conversations that the board and the community has been having, going back to 2020, when the most recent time. State law required us to go to the voters, the community, to ask for additional dollars, not only for operations, but for facilities. So in a lot of ways, it's a continuation of a conversation that has been going and predates even 2020. But the goals for the board that result in our priority and our focus really begins with the board's decision to focus on these goals for the 24-25 budget. And they're in no particular order, but in terms of equitable resources and distribution, focusing on class sizes, the notion that staff are what makes who we are. You all make us the Madison School District. We are the district. We serve the community, the scholars, and the families. So in terms of compensation for staff, it's critical, it's important. It's a commitment, a priority for the board, as it is as we look forward. We're investing and continuing to invest in K-4, Joe mentioned, but early literacy, the new reading curriculum, right? And then the board always has the equity lens, a tool to review programs and priorities, to reground, to make sure we're on the right path moving forward. So in Wisconsin and school finance, I'm not going to bore you with the details. There's a great video coming up. But school finance and our budget, along with every other district in the state, really begins with revenues, right? It's a story of revenues. Costs are important. You must maintain your costs. You must make sure you're trying to be most efficient, delivering services effectively. But in Wisconsin, it's about revenues and state law that is set up to not even begin on an equal footing, revenues and costs, right? Revenues by design, legislature at the state level has underfunded on the revenue side public education. It's an intentional decision to fund less public schools. And the solution in terms of state law, when a school board says we need revenues to equal ongoing costs, inflationary cost increases, the state's not providing it in state law, the foundational level of revenues to match revenues to ongoing costs, the state law says, go to referendum. If you want revenues to match inflationary increases of costs, you need to ask your voters to allow you to gain that revenue, right? And revenue in Wisconsin is a combination of property taxes and state aids, which you can cue it up.
Our public schools are the cornerstone of our community. The education and opportunities we provide for students today shape their futures and ours. Schools, like any organization, need money to operate. But in Wisconsin, funding the needs of our schools has been a growing challenge. State policy limits how much school districts can spend. The vast majority of school funding comes from a combination of state dollars and local property taxes. It's called the revenue limit, and it acts as a cap per student that school districts can spend each year. Even if school costs go above this level, schools can't spend any more than this limit. From 1994 to 2009, these revenue caps were adjusted for inflation, which meant they helped schools keep up with ongoing needs. But since 2010, the resources districts need to survive have fallen farther and farther behind the basic costs to operate our schools. By the end of 2025, the revenue limit will have fallen more than $3,300 per student behind inflation. In the Madison Metropolitan School District, with roughly 25,000 students, that's a decrease of more than $82 million. What's more, each district has a different revenue cap, and these caps are not tied to the needs of the students or the cost to the schools that serve them. Our job as a school district is to make sure all of our students have access to the exceptional educational opportunities we provide, no matter what their needs when they walk through our doors. But state funding falls short of what it costs to meet the specific needs of many of our students. When that happens, we have to use money from our general fund to cover the difference, which means taking dollars from other important needs. The largest portion of our budget goes towards staffing. Our people are the heart of our schools. Without enough educators who instruct, support, and inspire learning, schools can't provide the lessons, programs, and opportunities our students deserve. Other important budget items include curriculum, technology, transportation, operations, and maintenance. We work hard to balance our budgets, yet resources for schools have been shrinking year after year since 2010. With costs growing faster than funding, districts are always looking for ways to trim costs and work smarter, like deferring needed school maintenance, cutting programs, reducing staff, and many other strategies. But schools can only cut so much before they start to harm educational opportunities for their students. To maintain class sizes, keep up with rising costs, take care of school buildings, and protect high-quality instruction, many districts have turned to their community to help fill the state-imposed funding gap. Since the arrival of revenue limits, over 80% of school districts have done so by asking local voters to raise their caps through an operational referendum. Most have used the option multiple times. Our children don't have time to wait for state policymakers to fix the school funding system. By putting the needs of our students first, we are investing in their potential and the future of our whole community. Strong schools make strong communities where families want to move and stay. Learn more about school funding by visiting our website.
Wasn't that good? Two things I want to highlight. The video talked about many school districts. I think 80% have gone to referendum. Madison has been very fortunate as a community. We have gone to referendum often, asking the community to vote yes in terms of providing additional revenues historically to support our schools. That's very important. And so in 2020, the board asked the community to provide additional operating revenues to try to catch up for some of that lost revenues based on state law, also to begin an investment in our school facilities. The second important point of that video is every district in Wisconsin is funded differently from property taxes to state aid. In Wisconsin, because of our high property wealth and how much we spend on our public schools, we're about 90% funded on property taxes and 10% on state aids. There are other districts in the state that are 80% funded in state aids and 20% on the property tax. What that means is in Madison, because of our general property value wealth and Dane County a growing economy, we can, according to the state, which is true, support our public schools more on the tax and state aids, right? State aids meant to equalize the tax base. That's very important to know and understand, because when we ask voters for additional operating revenues, it's primarily going to be coming through property taxes, right? That's just a fact of school finance in Wisconsin. A little bit on keeping up with inflation to kind of bring it current in terms of revenues and the discrepancy ongoing revenues and ongoing expenditures. For us in Madison, the revenue limits, taking into consideration last year and this year projections, were about $30.2 million short from sustainable revenues, inflationary increases to matching the costs. So had our revenue limits been tied to inflation, the Madison School Board would have an additional $30.2 million this last year that just ended and the year going forward. A little bit about special education and individualized education programs. It's critically important for the board and us as staff to provide the needs of students. in terms of students with disabilities and special education programs. Critically important. Madison does a great job meeting the needs of children that have been identified with special needs. The problem with is on the funding side, right? The state does not fund equally, even close to 50-50. Instead, it's about 31% funded on special education. So for every dollar we spend, the state will give us 30 cents. The rest comes from our general fund or other resources that we have under revenue limits. That's about a $66 million gap in 23-24, where we need to take from our general fund to fund the critical needs of the students to implement special plans that the kids have, the students have. That's important, right? We continue to do that. We will continue to do that, but that caused a revenue shortfall in the rest of the budget. Statewide, that gap is $1.5 billion in 23-24 and continues to increase. The other problem with school finance in Wisconsin is four-year-old kindergarten. Joe talked about it, the board has talked about it, continuing to invest in four-year-old kindergarten. State law considers a four-year-old child as 0.5 or half a student, right? Clearly, a four-year-old kindergarten full-time has the cost of a full-time student, but the state recognizes that as a half a child, which is critically important in terms of generating sufficient revenues under revenue limits that are based on the number of students. So if you count a student as one for costs, but as a half a student for revenues, you're never going to have a formula that equals, right? Again, another reason why you go to a referendum to ask voters to provide additional revenues. Madison invests levies every year $5 million specifically for school maintenance, which is important. Since 2008, $93 million has been raised for facility investment. Our schools are in critical need of investment. 26 of our schools were built 60 plus years ago. 40 of our schools have received a C or a D. This is from research that we've been doing over the last year in terms of a facility condition report that's on the website and a long-range facilities plan. So our needs are great in terms of facilities, greater than any one operating budget annually can do, or greater than any one referendum seeking investment in our facilities. That's not too bad, Jen.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Shepke. For those who don't know me, I'm the Director of Special Projects for MMSD and UW-Madison School of Ed. For the purposes of here, though I wear many hats, I am the project manager of our referendum work. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the data that we've been gathering to understand where we go with the referendum work. One of the bits of data is talking with our community and families. So we've done 2 phases of community engagement thus far. Those 2 engagements have amounted in what you see here, 10 citywide input sessions. We've had 3 superintendent advisory committee meetings, a community leader, a think tank, and over 4,000 surveys submitted from our community, families, and students and staff about what they want to see in our buildings. We have heard from them that 1, staff retention, staff issues is a big concern. They want to understand about compensation. They want to understand how we provide a working environment that is well suited for our staff. Along with that, they're looking at culture and climate in our schools and wanting to know more about how we keep their class sizes smaller. We also heard from them that they wanted to understand better this renovate versus build new idea, which we're going to hear more about in a few minutes. So there are parts of our buildings that people love, and there are parts of our buildings that people don't love. And we're trying to understand what those are so we can better understand what it is that we're going to focus on within the facilities part. We also heard that they are prioritizing comfortable learning environments, cooling, air conditioning, heating, plumbing. Those happen to be the parts of our buildings that need the most love right now. We'll be hearing too about phase 3 community engagement from Amy in just a few moments. So all the bits of data came up to 2 referendum questions that we presented to the board and the board voted upon this summer. Those 2 questions is a $100 million reoccurring operation fund and $507 million facility question. Those are two separate questions that will be on the November 5th ballot. And Bob's going to walk us through what those actually are.
So the question the board approved for the operations is on the screen right now. It's over 4 years. We're asking the voters to take a look at and consider the need for revenues. 30 million this fall, 30 million the following, followed by 20 million and then 20 million, for a total of 100 million over 4 years for recurring purposes, really for operational and maintenance expenses, both, with a call out for a continued educational programming and employee compensation and benefits, right? So we've been asked a couple of questions about what this referendum is. So as you're just sustaining your base operations, that's true. There is some sustaining going on, but it's much more, as we talked about in terms of the budget for 24-25. It's really a continued investment that the board is making in our community. It's a commitment to excellence, right? And it's a focus on retaining high-quality teachers and staff, investing in four-year-old kindergarten, expanding multilingual education, preparing our students and families for a globalized world, which is, Dane County. I mean, look at the diversity we have in Dane County. It's a strength. It's a positive attribute. But we have needs of families and scholars to meet because of a diversified population, which is really important. And as Joe mentioned, fostering well-rounded opportunities in the arts and the co-curriculars, with a focus on middle schools in terms of the facilities question, which was a commitment back in 2020 with the board and talking to the community about the need to begin to invest in our facilities. So 30-30-2020, the first year is estimated $26 monthly impact on year one, this fall's referendum. When it's fully annualized in 27-28, it becomes an $87 a month increase on the average tax and the average home for the property taxpayer. The facilities referendum is even more wordy than the operating referendum, but it lists 10 schools at 7 sites. It talks about the need both to build new and to renovate, to invest in our facilities. $507 million. Both this facilities referendum and the operating referendum, I need to stress, is a maximum allowed, right? The board can use less in terms of operations if they're taking a look at the costs in each one of the years moving forward. It gives the board the opportunity to use those revenues. The Madison School Board has historically, in the past, when they've gone to referendum, has not used the entire authority granted by taxpayers. They only use what they need in terms of covering the costs in that specific year. Facilities are much the same way. $507 million is a maximum for the 10 schools and 7 sites. If the board or we as a community don't need all that money, we wouldn't use all that money. We talked about the need for our facilities in terms of a reinvestment and continued either renovation or building new. We focused on 10 schools right now. There's a need is greater. It's going to be at least a few decades, I would say, in terms of looking at our facility infrastructure based on the facility condition report that was put out last fall. But these 10 schools really focused on, one, middle schools, geographically diverse across our district, and really focused on the schools that need most on mechanical HVAC, heating, ventilating, air conditioning, and mechanical plumbing, which is the upper right of the open square in terms of a D or F in terms of color coding. These are the locations of the schools: Black Hawk, Samuel Gompers, Shabazz and Sherman, Senate Middle School, Cherokee Heights, Toki, Orchard Ridge, Anana, and Crestwood, right? So the focus being on middle schools and high priority in need of renovation, elementary schools, right? So the facilities referendum in terms of our look is much more than taking a footprint and replacing it with exactly the same building structure. It's modernizing to today's standards educational settings, from classrooms to cafeterias to libraries to shared spaces. It's really making modern middle schools to prepare students not only in STEM and the arts, but reading, and really taking a look at and focusing on, which is critical for us, really shortly, air conditioning, right? Air conditioning in our school buildings is a critical need, not only for the scholars, but our staff, and for the community to use our buildings. So, the facilities referendum has no impact this fall. The first levy would impact fall of '25. And when that becomes in place next year, it ends up being about $27 a month on an annual ongoing basis to pay the principal and interest of the bonds that will be sold to finance that facility, $507 million, over a period of 23 years. There'll be 20-year debts, but we will sell bonds only as we need them over a 5-year construction phase. Thus, you get to 23 years in terms of a payback schedule. All right, enough of that detail. Estimated tax impacts. First, this is estimated. These are based on projections. A lot of things are moving. Joe mentioned earlier today, we won't actually know final dollar amounts until October 15th of this school year for our current 24-25 year. We'll get that number from the state. It's in state law. The board will then use that number against our revenue limits, which is based on this third Friday in September, which we don't know yet. And I'll come up with my team a final budget, 2 budgets to propose for the board to be adopted in October, right? So in 24-25, if the $30 million is fully utilized in terms of the levy, the tax impact on the average Madison home is $317. In year 2, 25-26, it's that original $317 plus the next $30 million. So the blue is the operating referendum over 4 years, scaffolded in over 4 years, ultimately resulting in an estimate of $1,050 in year 4, which comes up to that $87 a month. The facilities referendum, you can see, no impact this fall. The first impact on the levy would be fall of '25, and that would be about $327 a month, a year, or around $26, $27 a month in terms of supporting the debt paid back on the bonds that would be sold. And that on goes. And now I'll hand this off to Amy. Are we on time? Oh, we're on time. We want to save time for questions, for Amy to answer.
No. Hello. I get to talk about really fun stuff, not all the fun stuff Bob gets to talk about and Joe gets to talk about. I get to tell you what you can do and what you can't do. We have special rules as district employees that we need to abide by when we are in referenda. Go ahead, Jen. So I'll start with the do's. I'll start with the things we can do. We can encourage people to come to our information sessions, which you will hear about shortly. We have 10 upcoming sessions, and so you can invite your neighbors, your communities, to encourage them to come to the sessions and learn more. You can distribute information. And Jody is doing that right now. We have some one-pagers, an overview one-pager for the referenda that you can, it's a great little cheat sheet for you to go back to your office and have conversations with folks and when you're out in the community, just so you have those things that Bob just talked about and Dr. Gothard talked about. You can engage in community-based discussions. So when you're not on the clock, you're not representing MMSD at an event, or you're not representing MMSD during the school day as whatever position you may hold. You can have discussions with your family and friends at a barbecue, at tailgate, and you can talk about your personal opinion on things. We can't dictate that, but when you're in the capacity as a district employee, don't do that. Sorry, I jumped to the don'ts and the do's section. I'm so sorry. You can encourage people to vote. So you can make sure that people are voting on November 5th. Make sure that they get out and vote. We need all the votes not necessarily, I'm not advocating for the referendum, but we need everybody to go out and do their civic duty. Would be fantastic, no matter where they end up. Don'ts. District resources. We cannot use district resources or facilities to advocate. So when I say advocate, I say you cannot tell people that they need to support or vote yes. That we cannot do. We can encourage people to read more information and provide information, but we cannot explicitly tell people what we want them to do. Whether it be vote yes, whether it be vote no, we cannot do that. State an opinion. Sorry, I'm going to go back a little bit. I know a lot of us love to wear t-shirts. I love to wear t-shirts. We have great t-shirts in MMSD. That's another place that we need to make sure that we don't wear vote yes for the 2024 referendum or vote no for the referendum. We cannot wear clothing, so we cannot only not tell people to vote yes or vote no or support, but we can't wear buttons or pins or t-shirts or hold banners in hallways. I don't know what you do, but like make sure that we keep it informational and not perform advocacy. You can engage in classroom discussions. You can engage in classroom discussions advocating, but you can engage in classroom discussions informing folks. And I jumped to the buttons, but we covered a lot of it in the do's section and the don't section. But always be reminded that when you're talking about the referendum as a district employee, do not advocate, do not say yes, do not say support, just inform. Provide information, direct folks to our website, and direct folks to these sessions. We have 10 sessions coming up. We have sessions at 4 community centers throughout the city of Madison, and we have sessions at all of the schools that are impacted by the facilities referenda. So encourage your communities to come out and learn more about what that means to each one of those communities. Each one of our communities is unique and important and has dreams and goals and aspirations for that community, and we want to hear that feedback. It'll help inform the Board of Education as they make decisions moving forward about those facilities. So please come to those events. All right, it's questions, and I'm sure you don't have any for me. It's going to all be Bob, so I'm going to just hand the microphone over to Bob. Or Mike.
You want to questions? We're gonna.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll pop around. Any questions? I'm going to be the runner. Are the slides in the calendar invite? I am not sure, but we can make that happen. Yeah. Yeah. That is fantastic. Also, ensure that you visit our website. It has all this information and so much more. It has videos, it has stories, it has all of the things, but visit our website for sure.
And Amy, where will this video be stored or posted?
The video,
If they wanted to see this video.
yes, this video is going to be shared with folks that were unavailable to come today, and it'll also be shared with our folks out at Flom and at Holtzman, but I'm not sure. We'll make sure that the folks in this room have this video to be able to access at a later date. You bet. Jorge. Come in. I know.
I was gonna say I can speak loud enough, but it's all good. Hey Bob, real quick, if you go back to the where it shows the increase per year on the property tax, can you just clarify, is that total or is that per 100,000? Because I know on property value, because I know that was a question that has come up from the past referendums that we've done. So like when I'm looking at this slide right here, are those numbers per 100,000 on the value, on the property value, or is it total for that year?
Yeah, that wasn't a planned question. We have on our website a tax calculator where you can plug in your assessed home value and it'll lay your estimated tax impact out year 1, 2, 3, and 4. This is in total to the average home, which in 24, 25 is $457,300 in Madison, and then we project out. So it's in total for the average home in Madison. But we do have on our website, which, Amy, we have to put that little note in there. It's for
We put
city
it
of
there.
Okay, perfect.
It's there.
I didn't double check that, but
Yep.
So I think the city is now asking for a referendum for their expenses. Have you worked with the city in planning any of this? Is that going to be on the same ballot? How are we messaging how this is going for the taxpayers who are going to be asked all of this? Which will be in addition to all of the expenses you just showed.
Yeah, there's actually several answers. We have been in regular communication with the city ongoing since months ago. And of course, we are a different case. There's different rules and regulations that the city has to follow. And so we've been keeping each other apprised. We support the city, but we're really focusing on Madison Metropolitan School District. You know, like for instance, recently they post kind of the list of cuts that we were not expecting. But in answer to your question, yes. And, you know, they face some of the same critical issues we do in terms of shared funding from the state, and maybe colleagues can add to that.
yeah, so that's absolutely correct. Now, the city was looking at options, and clearly not until this week did the city council agree for a dollar amount. So we're going to, I've been meeting regularly with the city's finance director. We'll meet again to talk about how we can talk together on the impacts and what the net effect is of the tax, because, you know, school finance and what one ultimately ends up paying on the property tax bill is not a transparent and easy to understand process. So we're going to work on some coordinated communications on that side. As terms of the ballot in the city of Madison, all the questions will be on the same ballot. So in this case, our 2 questions and the city's questions will be a question on the ballot come November 5th.
And just to clarify, there are places, you know, we have addresses that are not in the city of Madison, so it's not kind of one universal ballot. It depends upon which school district that voter votes in.
Oh, comment. Just kidding.
Whoops. My question is just around the city recently released what programming would be cut or eliminated. Has the school district released any of that information yet if the referenda don't pass?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I'll answer it in a couple of ways. Right, every year in November, right after the board approves the budget, the approved budget for this school year 24-25. So our plan would have been is to begin in November of 24, looking at the 25-26 budget. That is no different than what the board has done any other year. So board approves the approved budget for the school year we're in October, and pretty much in November begins looking at the next school year budget. The first step in any budget is to project the amount of available revenues the board will have. And then they need to figure out, okay, this is our revenues, then what are our expenditures? And the board does what they always do. We'll use those. Remember, we talked about the budget goals. What are your goals? What are your priorities? This is what we're going to meet based on the number of revenues. So that won't happen until November. What the board's going to do in October this year, 24-25, they will actually approve 2 separate budgets. One budget that will meet the goals based on available revenues if a referendum doesn't pass, and another budget that will be based on the revenues available if the referendum does pass. So 2 budgets, one if the referendum is successful, one if it's not. Our budget that the board approved in June is based primarily in terms of making up the missing revenue from the state formula using our one-time fund balance, right? So one-time revenues, the approved budget, about $39 million of our fund balance will be used to support the 24-25 school year, which then, depending on the results in November, will allow the board to understand how to begin budgeting for 25-26, right? So much different than how the city has approached it in terms of their calendar years, which is different than ours, and in terms of how they work through their budget process.
Anybody else? Excellent. Well, I'm sure you have seen buttons around, and you saw it earlier, probably on the slides. You're all now officially MMSD ambassadors of the 24 referenda. So feel free to visit our website. This is all of our referenda. This isn't just this team up on the stage. This is everybody in this room's referenda. So I encourage you to check out the information and have good conversations with your community. Thank you.